In the middle of a scorching afternoon, when the desert floor is hot enough to blister skin in seconds, a shadow moves across the sand with a speed that seems impossible for a bird. What happens in the next 10 seconds will decide whether a creature covered in venomous fangs and needle-sharp hairs lives or becomes a meal. By the time this story ends, you will understand why the desert has produced one of the strangest and most one-sided showdowns in the entire animal kingdom. A clash between a bird that refuses to fly and a spider large enough to cover the palm of a human hand. This is the story of the Roadrunner against the tarantula, and once you see how this fight actually unfolds, you will never look at either animal the same way again. If you enjoy videos like this one, subscribe now and hit the like button. The American Southwest is a place built on extremes. Daytime temperatures regularly climb past 45 degrees Celsius, while nighttime cold can drop close to freezing within the same 24 hours. Water is scarce, shade is rare, and almost every creature that survives here has been shaped by millions of years of brutal natural selection. It is in this unforgiving landscape, stretching across Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and deep into northern Mexico, that two very different predators have carved out a shared territory. One is a bird that gave up flight for speed. The other is a spider that gave up size for patience. Neither animal set out to be famous, yet their paths cross more often than most people realize, and every time they do, one of them walks away, and one of them doesn't. The greater Roadrunner is not the cartoon most people grew up watching. It is a real, physically formidable predator built like a sprinter and armed like a soldier. Adults measure between 50 and 60 centimeters from beak to tail, with long legs adapted for one purpose above all others, covering ground fast. A Roadrunner can reach speeds of up to 32 kilometers per hour on foot, an astonishing pace for a bird that rarely bothers to take flight. Its wings are short and rounded, useful mostly for short bursts of lift or balance while running, not for sustained flight. Evolution stripped away the Roadrunner's need to fly, because running proved more efficient for hunting in dense scrub and open desert terrain, where prey hides low to the ground, and speed on foot means the difference between an easy meal and going hungry. Everything about the Roadrunner's body was built for the kill. Its beak is long, straight, and powerful, closer to a weapon than a simple feeding tool. Its eyes sit forward on its skull, giving it a level of depth perception that few other birds possess, essential for judging distance during a high-speed chase across uneven ground. Beneath its feathers, the Roadrunner carries dense, muscular legs capable of sudden direction changes, letting it cut off an escaping animal the way a cheetah cuts off a gazelle. And unlike most birds, which peck cautiously at prey, Roadrunners kill with brute force, slamming their targets against rocks and hard-packed earth until the prey stops moving. This is not an animal built for gentle foraging. It is built for combat. On the other side of this desert standoff sits the tarantula, an animal whose reputation has always outpaced the reality of what it actually is. Several species inhabit the same range as the Roadrunner, most notably the desert blonde tarantula and the Texas brown tarantula, both large ground-dwelling spiders that can measure over 10 centimeters across when their legs are fully extended. Despite their intimidating size, tarantulas are surprisingly slow, deliberate hunters. They do not chase prey across open ground. Instead, they rely on ambush, patience, and a set of highly specialized defenses that have kept them alive for tens of millions of years, long before Roadrunners, or for that matter, humans, ever existed. A tarantula's venom is often assumed to be lethal, but for an animal the size of a Roadrunner, a tarantula bite is closer to a bee sting in terms of danger. The venom evolved primarily to subdue small prey like crickets, beetles, and the occasional small lizard, not to kill birds. What makes the tarantula genuinely dangerous is not its bite, but a defense mechanism most people know nothing about: urticating hairs. These are fine, barbed hairs located on the spider's abdomen that it can kick loose with its hind legs when threatened. Once airborne, these microscopic hairs embed themselves in the eyes, mouth, and nasal passages of a predator, causing intense irritation, swelling, and in some cases temporary blindness. For a bird relying on sharp vision to hunt, a face full of urticating hairs can be devastating, turning a simple meal into a serious tactical problem. Despite this formidable defense, Roadrunners have developed one of the most effective counter-strategies in the desert. Speed is the Roadrunner's greatest weapon against a tarantula. Where a coyote or a snake might approach cautiously, giving the tarantula time to sense vibration and prepare its defenses, a Roadrunner closes distance almost instantly. In the brief window between a tarantula sensing danger and physically reacting, the Roadrunner has often already struck. This single advantage, raw acceleration over short distances, is the reason Roadrunners succeed against a prey animal that has successfully deterred countless other predators, generation after generation. The hunt typically begins in the early morning or late afternoon, when temperatures are survivable and both animals are most active. Tarantulas, being nocturnal or crepuscular by nature, are often caught outside their burrows during these transitional hours, either searching for a mate during the breeding season or repositioning after a night of hunting. Male tarantulas, in particular, become significantly more vulnerable during late summer and early fall, when biological instinct drives them out of the safety of their burrows in search of females. This mating migration, sometimes involving hundreds of tarantulas crossing open desert terrain in a single season, creates a temporary buffet for Roadrunners, who quickly learn to patrol known migration routes. When a Roadrunner spots a tarantula moving across open ground, its behavior shifts almost instantly from casual foraging to focused predation. The bird lowers its head, extends its neck forward, and begins closing the gap with rapid, controlled strides, using surrounding vegetation and terrain features to mask its approach for as long as possible. Tarantulas detect threats primarily through vibration sensed by tiny hairs on their legs, not through vision, since their eyesight is notably poor despite having 8 eyes. This gives the Roadrunner a crucial tactical edge, because a bird moving with precise, deliberate footfalls can approach far closer than a heavier, clumsier predator before triggering the spider's defensive instincts. The moment the Roadrunner is within striking range, everything happens in less than a second. The bird's beak snaps forward and down, aiming for the tarantula's cephalothorax, the front body segment housing the spider's vital organs and brain. A precise strike here can immobilize the tarantula almost instantly, preventing it from kicking loose its defensive hairs or delivering a bite. If the first strike is imprecise, the fight becomes considerably more dangerous for the Roadrunner. A tarantula, given even half a second of warning, will rear back on its hind legs, exposing its fangs in a defensive posture while simultaneously brushing its abdomen with its rear legs to launch a cloud of urticating hairs toward the attacker's face. This is the moment where the outcome of the encounter genuinely hangs in the balance. A Roadrunner that mistimes its strike will often retreat temporarily, shaking its head and rubbing its beak against the ground to dislodge irritating hairs before regrouping for a second attempt. Rather than charging straight back in, the bird typically circles the tarantula, repositioning to an angle that limits further exposure to another hair kick before committing to one final, decisive strike. That brief, calculated pause is often the difference between a clean kill and a bird abandoning the hunt altogether. Once a Roadrunner successfully immobilizes a tarantula, the kill itself is swift and mechanical. Gripping the spider firmly in its beak, the bird will repeatedly slam the tarantula against a rock, a fallen branch, or hard-packed soil, a behavior scientists refer to as prey bashing. This serves two purposes at once: killing the spider quickly and physically breaking down its body enough to make swallowing easier. Tarantulas, despite their size, are surprisingly manageable prey once subdued, and a Roadrunner can consume smaller specimens whole, while larger tarantulas may require several minutes of repeated bashing before the bird can safely swallow its meal without risking injury from remaining leg movement or residual defensive reflexes. Nutritionally, tarantulas represent a significant payoff for Roadrunners. Packed with protein and fat reserves built up over months of the spider's own hunting, a single tarantula can provide a substantial portion of a Roadrunner's daily caloric needs, particularly valuable during the demanding breeding season when adult Roadrunners are feeding not only themselves, but a nest full of rapidly growing chicks. Roadrunner pairs, which mate for life and share incubation and feeding duties, actively seek out tarantulas and other large invertebrates specifically because the energy return justifies the risk involved in subduing such a well-defended prey animal. It would be inaccurate to suggest that roadrunners win every encounter. Tarantulas that detect an approaching predator early enough have several viable escape strategies. Their thick exoskeleton and dense covering of hairs make them surprisingly resistant to a poorly aimed first strike, and a tarantula that reaches the safety of its burrow entrance before the roadrunner closes the distance will typically survive the encounter entirely, retreating underground into tunnels far too narrow and deep for a bird to follow. Burrow proximity, more than any other single factor, determines whether a given tarantula survives an encounter with a hunting roadrunner. Spiders caught in open terrain, far from a burrow, face significantly higher mortality rates than those ambushed near their tunnel entrance. Roadrunners are opportunistic, generalist predators, and tarantulas represent just one item on a diet that includes lizards, snakes, small rodents, insects, and even other birds. Roadrunners are famous, and rightly so, for their ability to kill venomous snakes, including small to medium-sized rattlesnakes, using the same combination of speed and precise beak strikes seen in their tarantula hunts. This adaptability places the roadrunner near the top of the desert's mid-sized predator hierarchy, competing directly with animals like coyotes, bobcats, and birds of prey for many of the same food sources. Tarantulas, for their part, play an equally important ecological role, controlling populations of insects and smaller invertebrates that would otherwise place heavier pressure on desert vegetation and soil systems. Despite their fearsome reputation, tarantulas are remarkably long-lived animals, with females in some species surviving 25 years or more in the wild, far longer than most other arthropods. This longevity means that surviving repeated encounters with predators like roadrunners over a lifetime requires consistent, reliable defensive behavior, not luck. Every tarantula that reaches old age in roadrunner territory has effectively passed a decades-long survival test against one of the desert's most efficient hunters. Climate and seasonal patterns heavily influence how often these two animals actually meet. During the peak of summer heat, both species shift their activity toward the cooler hours of dawn and dusk, increasing the likelihood of encounters during these overlapping active periods. Male tarantula migrations during late summer create the highest risk period of the year for the species, coinciding almost perfectly with the period when roadrunner parents are working hardest to feed hungry chicks. Human development across the American Southwest has added new variables to this ancient relationship. Suburban expansion into desert habitat has, in some regions, brought roadrunners into closer contact with tarantulas, displaced from traditional burrow sites by construction and land clearing. Roadrunners have proven remarkably adaptable to human presence, often hunting along roadsides, golf courses, and residential landscaping, environments where tarantulas seeking new burrow locations sometimes find themselves exposed in the open for longer periods than they would in undisturbed desert habitat. This adaptability has, if anything, made roadrunners even more successful predators in altered landscapes, while tarantulas have had to adjust migration and burrowing behavior in response. Neither animal relies on raw power. A roadrunner rarely weighs more than 350 grams and stands only a foot or so off the ground, facing off against a spider heavy enough to fill an adult's palm. What decides the outcome is behavior, not size. Scientists studying these interactions have noted that roadrunner hunting success against tarantulas tends to improve significantly with age and experience, suggesting that individual birds essentially learn and refine their technique over repeated encounters, much like a predator perfecting a skill through practice rather than relying purely on instinct. Younger, less experienced roadrunners are more likely to retreat after a failed strike, while mature individuals show greater persistence and more calculated approach angles. This kind of behavioral learning is a large part of why the roadrunner has become one of the desert's most consistently successful predators, adapting its approach to whatever prey stands in front of it. For the tarantula, survival is less about intelligence and more about physiology and probability. A tarantula cannot learn to outsmart a specific predator the way a roadrunner learns to refine its hunting technique, but it can rely on a nervous system finely tuned to detect the subtle vibrations of an approaching threat, urticating hairs capable of deterring even determined predators, and a burrow system engineered for rapid retreat. Over the course of a tarantula's long lifespan, these passive, instinctive defenses prove remarkably effective, statistically speaking, since the vast majority of tarantulas that survive to adulthood continue surviving year after year despite living alongside skilled predators like the Roadrunner. Neither species holds a permanent advantage. The Roadrunner remains one of the few birds on the planet able to consistently hunt large, venomous, and physically defended prey, using nothing but speed, timing, and precision. The tarantula remains one of the most resilient predators in the invertebrate world, protected by chemical defense and decades of instinctive caution. Their encounters are brief, violent, and decided in a matter of seconds, and every single one comes down to the same simple rule. Whichever side reacts first, wins. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel and leave a like so you don't miss the next videos.